We celebrate the partnership between our two countries. Mr. President, I must say it again, in the fight for your country's future, you have shown extraordinary courage, extraordinary bravery, and you and the Mexican people have a full and committed partner in the United States.
But it's still unclear if President Obama has any Republican partners on immigration reform.
But you can say that these two are partners in not liking what's going on in Arizona. Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Washington Post Top Line. I'm David Chalian.
And I'm Rick Klein.
Each weekday we're bringing you the very latest political headlines, reporting, insight, analysis, everything you need and want to know about politics.
And we are your partners. It's twitter.com/the note. Let us know what you think.
Get us started, sir. What's your top line?
Border lines. So much for not talking about immigration. It is everywhere now, with the Mexican president Calderon in town, bringing it up directly on the White House lawn yesterday, saying he is not a fan of this Arizona immigration law. President Obama, of course, agrees with him. And then his wife, First Lady Michelle Obama, confronted by the unlikeliest of folks, a second grader who talks apparently about the immigration status of her mother, an extraordinary moment that sort of refocuses the debate.
It's very odd when you have a second grader telling the First Lady that my mother doesn't have papers, and yet then you wonder, well, what is the enforcement follow-up from that from the immigration folks? Yeah. Blocked. Financial regulatory reform once again meets with failure for the Democrats. Harry Reid tried to bring it up yesterday. He is now confident he's going to get past this filibuster today. He's going to have 60 votes, but only after it seems that he threw a little dirt in the face of Scott Brown. He said Scott Brown lied to him about a commitment that he was going to vote with the Democrats to end debate, bring this to a final vote. That didn't happen yesterday. Reid lost a couple Democrats. Today he says it's all going to be there, 60 votes.
Harry Reid, of course, the original "you lie" senator in all of this. It's interesting to see a couple of senators go rogue, though. I mean, people are reading into it as a symptom of the culture we're seeing everywhere. And obviously, after the Tuesday election results, senators are out for themselves in large part. And a lot of them are just deciding, this is exactly not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to go with the party line on this, even maybe go with my word. Lunch with Rand. Rand Paul is on the defensive 24 hours after locking up the Republican nomination for Senate in Kentucky. He made headlines with an appearance last night at the Rachel Maddow show where he seemed to suggest that he was not in support necessarily of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, even going a little further and talking about how a Woolworth's lunch counter should be controlled by the owners of a Woolworths. Now, I don't even know if there are Woolworths anymore for lunch, but regardless, this is a difficult one for him. He's walking it back a little bit today, but this was really the fear that establishment Republicans had about Rand Paul for Senate.
And not just a little bit. I mean, they put out a release called Rand Paul Sets the Record Straight, and he says, I will not support any efforts to repeal the Civil Rights Act of 1964. He's clearly trying to get this issue behind him. And second acts, that's our final top line of the day. This just struck me as unbelievable. Vito Fossella, the former Republican congressman from Staten Island, who you may recall left Congress in shame because of a secret second family he had, is now making an effort for a comeback. The Staten Island Republican Executive Committee backed him yesterday. State Republicans overall not so sure this is their candidate, but this comes on the heels of Eliot Spitzer, the disgraced former governor, starting to anchor cable TV shows, talk up his return to politics, and David Vitter sitting rather comfortably in the polls right now for his re-election efforts in Louisiana. What is going on here? Can you not do bad things and be permanently rejected by the voters?
Of course, the only question in my mind, which family does Vito Fossella show up with? That is his announcement for his campaign.
We are going to begin with some delving into the results from Tuesday night's elections, specifically that House race in Pennsylvania. We're joined by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee Chairman Chris Van Hollen, Congressman from Maryland. Congressman, thanks a lot for being here. I want to start. I know you guys are really pleased with your big victory in that special House race in Pennsylvania, and you think that perhaps that will prevent this massive wave that folks have been talking about for the fall. But I do want to read you just a little bit of Karl Rove's column in the Wall Street Journal today. He writes, there's some truth to that, but the vast majority of those incumbents in this anti-incumbent year are likely to be Democrats. And the only bright moment for Democrats Tuesday came from a candidate who explicitly disavowed Obama's significant policy victory and expressed views on social issues that are detested by most national Democrats. Mark Kritz ran against health care. He did not embrace Pelosi Obama, and that's not going to be the case for most of your troubled incumbents going on in November, right?
Hey, look, I'm not surprised Karl Rove would want to try and put that spin on a race which was clearly a big victory for Democrats. The fact of the matter is, Jack Murtha was a pro-life, pro-gun Democrat. So you've got in Mark Kritz, the kind of independent-minded Democrat who fits the district. It's the kind of Democrat that won in swing districts in 2006 and 2008. And the significance of Pennsylvania 12 is the Republicans did a test drive of their November strategy, and it totally crashed. They tried to make it all about scaring voters, about personalities, about President Obama and Speaker Pelosi, and it turned out that what the voters really wanted to know about was where the candidate stood on the fundamental economic and jobs issues. And there, the Republican was just, bring back the old Bush economic policies that got us into this mess to begin with, and Mark Kritz was about more solutions.
But to be clear, though, it seems difficult to make this a template for other races when for most Democrats, and certainly the vast majority of those who are running for re-election as opposed to as outsiders, they voted for Speaker Pelosi. They voted for the health care bill, for instance. How do you mold that? How do you run as the outsider, really, if you are the insider?
Well, because we had a test case of them. They threw everything at Mark Kritz. He said that he was the, Speaker Pelosi and the
right,
Barack
but Mark
Obama
Kritz was able to say that's not true because I'm not there.
No. What he said was that he was a pro-life, pro-gun, independently minded Democrat, and the the members of Congress, the incumbents, as you well know, some of them have been voting with the president on some issues. Some of them have been voting against the president on some issues. They have reflected that same independent nature that they ran on. They've always said they're going to be there for their constituents. So some of them voted with health care reform, some didn't. Some voted with the energy bill, some didn't. And they are doing what they said they would do here. I would point out that the biggest issue in Pennsylvania 12 was this issue of eliminating tax breaks that encourage the export and shipment of U.S. jobs overseas. And Mark Kritz is going to have an opportunity, perhaps as early as tomorrow, certainly by next week, to have a vote on exactly that issue, clamping down on some of the tax incentives to shipping jobs overseas. And we'll have to see where our Republican colleagues stand on that.
And you expect to see that issue in a lot of Democratic campaigns this fall?
Absolutely. I don't think anybody wants their tax dollars going to promote the export of jobs overseas. And again, we're going to have an opportunity to vote on exactly that issue in the next couple days. And that was a very important issue, as were the Republican proposals to turn Medicare into a voucher program, to say, hey, seniors, here's your voucher. You go out and fight with the insurance industry on your own. And Republican proposals to privatize Social Security. Those are issues of economic security. And during this time when, Wall Street was crashing, it's a good thing a lot of people didn't have their retirement in there. But now that Wall Street's doing great at the expense of Main Street, we continue to have Republicans in the Senate trying to slow down the Wall Street reform bill. And in the House, not a single Republican voted for Wall Street reform. So those are the kind of issues that are going to be on the voters' minds.
I know this is a Senate race and not a House race, but I am interested in your reaction to the comments from Rand Paul. Is there a larger issue here in your mind about the Tea Party movement and the direction that they take the party, or is this just Rand Paul specific as an issue?
Well, it was a very startling comment, and I do think it points to the fact that the whole Tea Party movement is a double-edged sword for the Republicans. On the one hand, there's some political energy there. On the other hand, they are driving these races in the Republican primaries farther and farther to the right. Another example in Kentucky the other night was against John Yarmouth, the NRCC candidate, the National Republicans candidate there, lost. The Tea Party candidate there won. And the next day, the NRCC said they're going to write off that race. And so you are seeing that push toward the far right in these Republican primaries in what are eventually and ultimately centrist districts where independent-minded swing voters are going to make the difference. And those voters aren't going to like what they see when it's way out of the mainstream.
Congressman, one of the big lessons from Tuesday that a lot of folks are looking at, Blanche Lincoln still in a bit of trouble trying to get through a runoff, but watching Specter go down, the Republican handpicked choice in Kentucky, the incumbent, the insider, the establishment sort of being rejected here by voters. And I wonder, so many of your vulnerable members are these freshmen and sophomores from 06 and 08. Is it easier for them, do you think, to shed the incumbency because they're still relatively new?
Yeah, I think what you have around the country is an anti-business as usual sort of feeling. In other words, the status quo is unacceptable. These new members have been part of shaking things up. And interestingly, even though the Democrats are the majority in the Congress and have the White House, we have remained the party of reform. Look at it, Wall Street reform. When it came to student loans, we took the power away from the banks, providing more money to students. When it came to simple things like fiscal responsibility in passing pay-go legislation.
Right.
We did that. But the point here is that I think what people don't want to do is go back to the same policies and economic agenda that got us into this mess to begin with. And the Republicans simply do not have a prescription for the future other than what they did in the past. And that is not going to be a winning argument for them.
Congressman Chris Van Hollen, chairman of the DCCC, thanks a lot for being here today.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.